Section 6 of An Account of Egypt by Herodotus. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. An Account of Egypt by Herodotus, Section 6. Their fashions of mourning and of burial are these. Whenever any household has lost a man who is of any regard amongst them, the whole number of women of that house forthwith plaster over their heads, or even their faces, with mud. Then, leaving the corpse within the house, they go themselves to and fro about the city and beat themselves, with their garments bound up by a girdle and their breasts exposed, and with them go all the women who are related to the dead man. And on the other side the men beat themselves, they too having their garments bound up by a girdle. And when they have done this, they then convey the body to the embalming. In this occupation certain persons employ themselves regularly and inherit this as a craft. These, whenever a corpse is conveyed to them, show to those who brought it wooden models of corpses made like reality by painting. And the best of the ways of embalming, they say, is that of him whose name I think it impiety to mention when speaking of a matter of such a kind. The second which they show is less good than this, and also less expensive. And the third is the least expensive of all. Having told them about this, they inquire of them in which way they desire the corpse of their friend to be prepared. Then they, after they have agreed for a certain price, depart out of the way, and, the others being left behind in the buildings, embalm according to the best of these ways thus. First, with the crooked iron tool, they draw out the brain through the nostrils, extracting it partly thus and partly by pouring in drugs. And after this, with a sharp stone of Ethiopia, they make a cut along the side, and take out the whole contents of the belly. And when they have cleared out the cavity, and cleansed it with palm wine, they cleanse it again with spices pounded up. Then they fill the belly with pure myrrh, pounded up, and with cassia and other spices, except frankincense, and sew it together again. Having so done, they keep it for embalming covered up in natron for 70 days. But for a longer time than this, it is not permitted to embalm it. And when the 70 days are past, they wash the corpse and roll its whole body up in fine linen cut into bands, smearing these beneath with gum, which the Egyptians use generally instead of glue. Then the kinsfolk receive it from them and have a wooden figure made in the shape of a man, and when they have had this made, they enclose the corpse, and having shut it up within, they store it then in a sepulchral chamber, setting it to stand upright against the wall. Thus they deal with the corpses which are prepared in the most costly way. But for those who desire the middle way and wish to avoid great cost, they prepare the corpse as follows. Having filled their syringes with the oil which is got from cedar wood, with this they forthwith fill the belly of the corpse, and this they do without having either cut it open or taken out the bowels, but they inject the oil by the breech, and having stopped the drench from returning back, they keep it then the appointed number of days for embalming, and on the last of the days they let the cedar oil come out from the belly, which they before put in, and it has such power that it brings out with it the bowels and interior organs of the body dissolved. And the natron dissolves the flesh, so that there is left of the corpse only the skin and the bones. When they have done this, they give back the corpse at once in that condition, without working upon it any more. The third kind of embalming, by which are prepared the bodies of those who have less means, is as follows. They cleanse out the belly with a purge, and then keep the body for embalming during the 70 days, and at once after that they give it back to the bringers to carry away. The wives of men of rank, when they die, are not given at once to be embalmed, nor such women as are very beautiful or of greater regard than others, but on the third or fourth day after their death, and not before, they are delivered to the embalmers. They do so about this matter in order that the embalmers may not abuse their women, for they say that one of them was taken once, doing so to the corpse of a woman lately dead, and his fellow craftsmen gave information. Whenever anyone, either of the Egyptians themselves or of strangers, is found to have been carried off by a crocodile, or brought to his death by the river itself, the people of any city by which he may have been cast up on land must embalm him and lay him out in the fairest way they can, and bury him in a sacred burial place, nor may any of his relations or friends besides touch him, but the priests of the Nile themselves handle the corpse and bury it as that of one who was something more than man. Hellenic usages they will by no means follow, and, to speak generally, they follow those of no other man whatever. This rule is observed by most of the Egyptians, but there is a large city named Chemis in the Theban district near Neapolis, and in this city there is a temple of Perseus, the son of Danae, which is of a square shape, and round it grow date palms. The gateway of the temple is built of stone, and of very great size, and at the entrance of it stand two great statues of stone. Within this enclosure is a temple house, and in it stands an image of Perseus. These people of Chemis say that Perseus is wont often to appear in their land, and often within the temple, and that a sandal which has been worn by him is found sometimes, being in length 2 cubits, and whenever this appears, all Egypt prospers. This they say, and they do, in honor of Perseus, after Hellenic fashion thus. They hold an athletic contest, which includes the whole list of games, and they offer in prizes cattle and cloaks and skins. And when I inquired why to them alone Perseus was wont to appear, and wherefore they were separated from all the other Egyptians in that they held an athletic contest, they said that Perseus had been born of their city, for Danaos and Lynceus were men of Chemis, and had sailed to Hellas, and from them they traced a descent and came down to Perseus. And they told me that he had come to Egypt for the reason which the Hellenes also say, namely, to bring from Libya the Gorgon's head, and had then visited them also, and recognized all his kinsfolk, and they said that he had well learnt the name of Chemis before he came to Egypt, since he had heard it from his mother, and that they celebrated an athletic contest for him by his own command. All these are customs practiced by the Egyptians who dwell above the fens, and those who are settled in the fenland have the same customs for the most part as the other Egyptians, both in other matters and also in that they live each with one wife only, as do the Hellenes. But for economy in respect of food, they have invented these things besides. When the river has become full, and the plains have been flooded, there grow in the water great numbers of lilies, which the Egyptians call lotos. These they cut with a sickle and dry in the sun, and then they pound that which grows in the middle of the lotus, and which is like the head of a poppy, and they make of it loaves baked with fire. The root also of this lotus is edible, and has a rather sweet taste. It is round in shape, and about the size of an apple. There are other lilies, too, in flower resembling roses, which also grow in the river, and from them the fruit is produced in a separate vessel, springing from the root by the side of the plant itself, and very nearly resembles a wasp's comb. In this there grow edible seeds in great numbers of the size of an olive stone, and they are eaten either fresh or dried. Besides this, they pull up from the fens the papyrus which grows every year, and the upper parts of it they cut off and turn to other uses. But that which is left below for about a cubit in length they eat or sell, and those who desire to have the papyrus at its very best bake it in an oven heated red hot, and then eat it. Some, too, of these people live on fish alone, which they dry in the sun after having caught them and taken out the entrails, and then, when they are dry, they use them for food. Fish which swim in shoals are not much produced in the rivers, but are bred in the lakes, and they do as follows. When there comes upon them the desire to breed, they swim out in shoals towards the sea, and the males lead the way, shedding forth their milt as they go, while the females, coming after and swallowing it up, from it become impregnated. And when they have become full of young in the sea, they swim up back again, each shoal to its own haunts. The same, however, no longer lead the way as before, but the lead comes now to the females, and they, leading the way in shoals, do just as the males did. That is to say, they shed forth their eggs by a few grains at a time, and the males coming after swallow them up. Now these grains are fish, and from the grains which survive and are not swallowed, the fish grow which afterwards are bred up. Now, those of the fish which are caught as they swim out towards the sea are found to be rubbed on the left side of the head, but those which are caught as they swim up again are rubbed on the right side. This happens to them because as they swim down to the sea, they keep close to the land on the left side of the river, and again as they swim up, they keep to the same side, approaching and touching the bank as much as they can, for fear doubtless of straying from their course by reason of the stream. When the Nile begins to swell, the hollow places of the land and the depressions by the side of the river first begin to fill, as the water soaks through from the river, and so soon as they become full of water, at once they are all filled with little fishes, and whence these are in all likelihood produced, I think that I perceive. In the preceding year, when the Nile goes down, the fish first lay eggs in the mud, and then retire with the last of the retreating waters. And when the time comes round again, and the water once more comes over the land, from these eggs forthwith are produced the fishes of which I speak. Thus it is as regards the fish. And for anointing, those of the Egyptians who dwell in the fens use oil from the castor berry, which oil the Egyptians call kiki, and thus they do. They sow along the banks of the rivers and pools these plants, which in a wild form grow of themselves in the land of the Hellenes. These are sown in Egypt, and produce berries in great quantity, but of an evil smell. And when they have gathered these, some cut them up and press the oil from them. Others again roast them first, and then boil them down, and collect that which runs away from them. The oil is fat, and not less suitable for burning than olive oil, but it gives forth a disagreeable smell. Against the gnats, which are very abundant, they have contrived as follows. Those who dwell above the fen land are helped by the towers, to which they ascend when they go to rest. For the gnats, by reason of the winds, are not able to fly up high. But those who dwell in the fenland have contrived another way instead of the towers, and this it is. Every man of them has got a casting net, with which by day he catches fish, but in the night he uses it for this purpose. That is to say, he puts the casting net round about the bed in which he sleeps, and then creeps in under it and goes to sleep. And the gnats, if he sleeps rolled up in a garment or a linen sheet, bite through these, but through the net they do not even attempt to bite. Their boats, with which they carry cargoes, are made of the thorny acacia, of which the form is very like that of the Kyrenian lotus, and that which exudes from it is gum. From this tree they cut pieces of wood about 2 cubits in length and arrange them like bricks, fastening the boat together by running a great number of long bolts through the 2 cubits pieces. And when they have thus fastened the boat together, they lay cross pieces over the top, using no ribs for the sides, and within they caulk the seams with papyrus. They make one steering oar for it, which is passed through the bottom of the boat, and they have a mast of acacia and sails of papyrus. These boats cannot sail up the river unless there be a very fresh wind blowing, but are towed from the shore. Downstream, however, they travel as follows. They have a door-shaped crate made of tamarisk wood and reed mats sewn together, and also a stone of about 2 talents weight bored with a hole, and of these the boatman lets the crate float on in front of the boat, fastened with a rope, and the stone drags behind by another rope. The crate then, as the force of the stream presses upon it, goes on swiftly, and draws on the baris, for so these boats are called, while the stone dragging after it behind and sunk deep in the water keeps its course straight. These boats they have in great numbers, and some of them carry many thousands of talents burden. When the Nile comes over the land, the cities alone are seen rising above the water, resembling more nearly than anything else the islands in the Aegean Sea, for the rest of Egypt becomes a sea, and the cities alone rise above water. Accordingly, whenever this happens, they pass by water not now by the channels of the river, but over the midst of the plain. For example, as one sails up from Naucratis to Memphis, the passage is then close by the pyramids, whereas the usual passage is not the same even here, but goes by the point of the delta and the city of Kirkasseros, while if you sail over the plain to Naucratis from the sea and from Canobos, you will go by Anthilla and the city called after Archander. Of these, Anthilla is a city of note, and is especially assigned to the wife of him who reigns over Egypt, to supply her with sandals. This is the case since the time when Egypt came to be under the Persians. The other city seems to me to have its name from Archander, the son-in-law of Danaos, who was the son of Phthios, the son of Achaeos, for it is called the city of Archander. There might indeed be another Archander, but in any case the name is not Egyptian. Hitherto my own observation and judgment and inquiry are the vouchers for that which I have said, but from this point onwards I am about to tell the history of Egypt according to that which I have heard, to which will be added also something of that which I have myself seen. Of Min, who first became king of Egypt, the priests said that, on the one hand, he banked off the site of Memphis from the river, for the whole stream of the river used to flow along by the sandy mountain range on the side of Libya, but Min formed by embankments that bend of the river which lies to the south about 100 furlongs above Memphis, and thus he dried up the old stream and conducted the river so that it flowed in the middle between the mountains, and even now this bend of the Nile is by the Persians kept under very careful watch, that it may flow in the channel to which it is confined, and the bank is repaired every year. For if the river should break through and overflow in this direction, Memphis would be in danger of being overwhelmed by flood. When this Min, who first became king, had made into dry land the part which was dammed off, on the one hand, I say, he founded in it that city which is now called Memphis, for Memphis too is in the narrow part of Egypt, and outside the city he dug round it on the north and west a lake communicating with the river, for the side towards the east is barred by the Nile itself. Then, secondly, he established in the city the temple of Hephaestus, a great work and most worthy of mention. After this man, the priests enumerated to me from a papyrus roll the names of other kings, 330 in number, and in all these generations of men, 18 were Ethiopians, 1 was a woman, a native Egyptian, and the rest were men and of Egyptian race. And the name of the woman who reigned was the same as that of the Babylonian queen, namely Nitocris. Of her They said that, desiring to take vengeance for her brother, whom the Egyptians had slain when he was their king, and then, after having slain him, had given his kingdom to her, desiring, I say, to take vengeance for him, she destroyed by craft many of the Egyptians. For she caused to be constructed a very large chamber underground, and making as though she would handsel it, but in her mind devising other things, she invited those of the Egyptians whom she knew to have had most part in the murder, and gave a great banquet. Then, while they were feasting, she let in the river upon them by a secret conduit of large size. Of her they told no more than this, except that, when this had been accomplished, she threw herself into a room full of embers, in order that she might escape vengeance. As for the other kings, they could tell me of no great works which had been produced by them, and they said that they had no renown except only the last of them, Moiris. He, they said, produced as a memorial of himself the gateway of the temple of Hephaestus, which is turned towards the north wind, and dug a lake, about which I shall set forth afterwards how many furlongs of circuit it has, and in it built pyramids of the size which I shall mention at the same time when I speak of the lake itself. He, they said, produced these works, but of the rest none produced any. Therefore, passing these by, I will make mention of the king who came after these, whose name is Sesostris. He, the priests said, first of all set out with ships of war from the Arabian Gulf, and subdued those who dwelt by the shores of the Erythraean Sea, until, as he sailed, he came to a sea which could no further be navigated by reason of shoals. Then, secondly, after he had returned to Egypt, according to the report of the priests, he took a great army and marched over the continent, subduing every nation which stood in his way, and those of them whom he found valiant and fighting desperately for their freedom. In their lands he set up pillars which told by inscriptions his own name and the name of his country, and how he had subdued them by his power. But as to those of whose cities he obtained possession without fighting or with ease, on their pillars he inscribed words after the same tenor as he did for the nations which had shown themselves courageous, and in addition he drew upon them the hidden parts of a woman, desiring to signify by this that the people were cowards and effeminate. Thus doing, he traversed the continent until at last he passed over to Europe from Asia, and subdued the Scythians and also the Thracians. These, I am of opinion, were the furthest people to which the Egyptian army came, for in their country the pillars are found to have been set up, but in the land beyond this they are no longer found. From this point he turned and began to go back, and when he came to the river Phasis, what happened then I cannot say for certain, whether the king Sesostris himself divided off a certain portion of his army and left the men there as settlers in the land, or whether some of his soldiers were wearied by his distant marches and remained by the river Phasis. For the people of Colchis are evidently Egyptian, and this I perceived for myself before I heard it from others. So when I had come to consider the matter, I asked them both. And the Colchians had remembrance of the Egyptians more than the Egyptians of the Colchians. But the Egyptians said they believed that the Colchians were a portion of the army of Sesostris. That this was so I conjectured myself, not only because they are dark-skinned and have curly hair, this of itself amounts to nothing, for there are other races which are so, but also still more because the Colchians, Egyptians, and Ethiopians alone of all the races of men have practiced circumcision from the first. The Phoenicians and the Syrians who dwell in Palestine confess themselves that they have learnt it from the Egyptians, and the Syrians about the river Thermodon and the river Parthenios, and the Macronians, who are their neighbors, say that they have learnt it lately from the Colchians. These are the only races of men who practice circumcision, and these evidently practice it in the same manner as the Egyptians. Of the Egyptians themselves, however, and the Ethiopians, I am not able to say which learnt it from the other, for undoubtedly it is a most ancient custom. But that the other nations learnt it by intercourse with the Egyptians, this among others is to me a strong proof, namely, that those of the Phoenicians who have intercourse with Hellas cease to follow the example of the Egyptians in this matter, and do not circumcise their children. Now, let me tell another thing about the Colchians to show how they resemble the Egyptians. They alone work flax in the same fashion as the Egyptians, and the two nations are like one another in their whole manner of living and also in their language. Now, the linen of Colchis is called by the Hellenists sardonic, whereas that from Egypt is called Egyptian. The pillars which Sesostris, king of Egypt, set up in the various countries are for the most part no longer to be seen extant, but in Syria, Palestine, I myself saw them existing with the inscription upon them which I have mentioned, and the emblem. Moreover, in Ionia there are two figures of this man carved upon rocks, one on the road by which one goes from the land of Ephesus to Phocaia, and the other on the road from Sardis to Smyrna. In each place there is a figure of a man cut in the rock, of 4 cubits and a span in height, holding in his right hand a spear, and in his left a bow and arrows, and the other equipment which he has is similar to this, for it is both Egyptian and Ethiopian. And from the one shoulder to the other, across the breast, runs an inscription carved in sacred Egyptian characters, saying thus: "This land with my shoulders I won for myself." But who he is and from whence he does not declare in these places, though in other places he had declared this. Some of those who have seen these carvings conjecture that the figure is that of Memnon, but herein they are very far from the truth. End of section 6. Recording by Linda Johnson.